Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Disciple Hour, Episode 9. I'm your host, Northern Westman, and with me are John Malt, Ian, and Gentile Gentleman. Would you guys like to say hi?
Hi.
Hi, this is Ian.
Good morning, everybody.
All right, today we're going to talk about Satanism and how it's increasingly more obvious in society. But before we do, I do want to address a little thing that I mentioned in the last podcast, and that is the idea that Adam sacrificed himself for Eve. So, this is a theory that I had heard a couple of months ago, and it sort of resonated with me, and so I believed it. But then people questioned me about it, and so I took a better look at it. And so I just want to, clear the atmosphere, and I want to dive into Genesis chapter 3, starting at verse 11. So this is after Adam and Eve had bitten the fruit. And it reads, "And he said, God, who told thee that thou wast naked? Hast thou eaten of the tree whereof I commanded thee that thou shouldest not eat? And the man said, The woman whom thou gavest to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat. And the Lord God said unto the woman, What is this that thou hast done? And the woman said, The serpent beguiled me, and I did eat. And the Lord God said unto the serpent, Because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle, and above every beast of the field. I'm going to stop there. So the woman talks about how she was beguiled, but Adam doesn't mention that he was beguiled. He just says that the woman, she gave me of the tree, this fruit, and I did eat. If we go a little backwards here to verse 6, it reads, And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof, and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. So she ate first, gave it to Adam, and he just ate. It's just a chronological order here. It doesn't mention how Adam felt or anything. And then, their eyes were opened and they knew that they were naked. Then we go back to verse 11 and 12, and he just says, The woman whom thou gavest to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat. It doesn't really say whether he was beguiled or if he did this on purpose or if he didn't know any better. And another theory, which I heard when diving into this, is that he was actually just blaming God. The woman whom thou gavest to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat. Very innocent. But I just wanted to clear that up. I don't really know what to think, to be honest. I did believe this theory that he sacrificed himself because that Jesus is the second Adam in a way. He sacrificed himself on the cross to save Israel, and Adam, sacrificed himself for Eve. That's kind of the reflection. But I don't know. Like, do you guys think this theory has a valid point, or is it total nonsense? What do you think?
I think we have to consider the conversation that happened between Adam and Eve, when she goes to offer him the fruit. Because she really repeats a lot of what the serpent says, to Adam. And so in a way it was kind of Eve that beguiled him. And I suppose, speaking from the experience of someone who's been married, wives have a really good way when they want you to do something of making you almost feel silly for not doing it. And I think that that definitely plays a part here in the sense that Adam, we have to remember he's the only man alive and Eve is the only woman alive. So they're not very experienced with trickery. They're not very experienced with deception. Satan kind of introduces this idea to them when they had never experienced it before. Like, why in their minds, as the first and only two people, would they ever think, oh, well, the snake might be lying to us? It was something that they really just had never dealt with. And so even though Eve does beguile her husband after she is kind of sweet talked by the snake, you know there's a bit of naivety that plays a large part there, in why they acted the way that they did, and neither of them really takes responsibility for their own role in it. Really, the only way they could have known that something was up was basically the snake told them that God was lying, and they believed it, and they should not have. So it was just really kind of the first example of a lack of faith that God might not be being honest with them about something. I think that was really what deceived them.
That's a good thought. Hmm. Yeah, they were incredibly innocent and naive. I mean, they didn't know, good and evil. I mean, that's kind of the point. They were just so innocent. But yeah. But unless you guys have any further things to add, I just wanted to clear that up.
Just one small thing to add. In that Genesis kind of drives home that God was not lying when he said, "You will surely die if you eat that fruit." Later on, throughout the early chapters of Genesis, when they go through who begat whom, this one begat that one. They always, throughout Genesis, they say he lived, 500 years and he died. He lived 700 years and he died. They tell the man how many years he lived, which was always in the hundreds, and the last thing they say over and over again is, "And he died." So that is how death entered the world. Uh, Adam died eventually, and every one of Adam's children that he begat died. I think that's the way Genesis drives home that message that God meant it. You will die if you eat from that tree of life, and all your children will die too.
That's a good thought. Yeah, their lifespans get shorter and shorter every generation, and it's also I also think that death, in a spiritual way, like you will not you will go to not the burning pit hell, but the Greek idea of hell. It's just the dark place where the souls, are. Where Jesus went down to hell, not the burning pit, but the cold, dark hell. You know, and defeated death. It's just basically the fall of man symbolizes that we are fallen from God, and it's only like the damage control, if you can call it that. I don't want to say reversion, but we can cheat death only through Jesus Christ, if that makes sense. Like, ye shall surely die, ye shall just fall from my grace, and you will die in this life, and you will go to hell. But then he, brings us this salvation, his only begotten Son, and through faith in him, we can cheat death. Anything else on this?
Um, I think it segues very good into the topic that we're going to be talking about later.
Mm-hmm.
About Satanism and the fact that this really is the first example of, kind of the root of where that comes from. And it's the same play by play, and people keep falling for it. It's that Satan tells you that God is not being honest with you, that God is somehow holding you back, from being greater, and that if you take it upon yourself, and you defy him, that you'll either become like him or somehow become your own god. I think that story encapsulates that in a way, and so many people read it without realizing that that's exactly what happens to everyone at some point in their life, and it depends on how you approach that bargain, where Satan, creeps into your mind and tells you, like, look, if I just stepped away from religion, if I stopped following God, if I just stopped believing he was there, I could do whatever I want, and then I'm limitless and my life will get better. Or, if I act in this way that is sinful or evil, but if I just stop caring what God thinks, I can get some benefit out of it and I can be my own God, and this story really is that perfect example of that.
Very true. And you also had this, you told me that Saul Alinsky, who wrote the book Rules for Radicals, he actually thanked what Satan or Satanism for his book because he picked it up from Genesis chapter 3. He tries to beguile women, with feminism and stuff like that, which is exactly what the serpent or Satan did to Eve. He beguiled the woman. Do you want to talk about that briefly, or?
Yeah, and the foreword to his book, right before you actually start reading the book, if you read those first few pages, he acknowledges that this book is dedicated to Satan because he was the first real revolutionary, because he was the first to ever, fight or defy God.
Wow.
And yeah, it is true. The revolutionaries always target women. They target their sentimentalities, they target their emotions, just like
Yeah.
Satan. Satan went after Eve first. He didn't go after Adam. He went after Eve first because most men kind of have a weakness for giving their woman what they want. And hearing your wife want something versus hearing a stranger tell you to do something, especially when you're a man, you're much more resistant to a stranger.
Mhm.
So yeah, there is definitely something to that I think, women want to, emotionally support certain things versus factually, whereas, men are much more factual, but we do have that weakness, for our women and for people that we care for, and it's definitely something to be cognizant of.
Yeah, very true. Very true. And this is our intro into Satanism. There's one thing about Satanism. Um, we actually have two testimonies about how this obvious spiritual evil or Satanism can actually bring people to faith. And this certainly was the case for me and also for John Malt. Would you like to tell your story, John, about how the spiritual evil woke you up?
Yeah, sure. So I was not raised a Christian. I became Christian uh, not all that long ago, actually. I mean, it was definitely in recent years. But one of the top things that brought me to Christ was that I sensed, saw, and noticed uh, what appeared to be evil in the world, and what I now know is. But when was it we started seeing things like men dressed like women in kindergartens, calling it drag queen story hour? What was that? 2015, 2014. Things of that nature, things there that couldn't be explained by profit, or things that businesses do that couldn't be explained by profit. They lose money on these stunts. Things that had no other motive or explanation other than that it was someone just wanted to do evil. Things I never thought I'd see before. I started seeing them, and I realized that this could be nothing else but Satanism. It seemed like almost textbook Satanism, if there is a textbook. But I mean, this was almost undeniably evil and wicked and satanic, and so I noticed that evil was a real thing. I mean, it's different than it wasn't crime. It wasn't even murder. It was evil for the sake of evil. That's what I noticed. Like I said, in maybe around 2015 or so, and that kind of led to a slow awakening in me.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I can give you all a brief story of how I noticed this increased evil. It was especially after I learned about the true crimes of the Bolsheviks. Just the things they did to people were so inhumane and so evil that most people, they cannot comprehend this this evil. They just don't believe that it can happen, but it did happen. And just, they could do the most horrific things to young children just for the sake of it. And that led me to be more open to the possibility of spiritual evil existing. And that just led, bit by bit, to me becoming a Christian, and just becoming baptized, and reading the entire Bible, and believing and praying, and finding community, and being a devoted Christian. So that's the short story. And the signs just get more and more obvious. We talked briefly about the Grammys, but maybe an interesting topic is to discuss what does this mean for Christians, that Satanism is increasingly becoming more obvious. Are these signs of the coming tribulation, do you think?
I hesitate to make calls like that.
Right.
I looking at it practically, it's a way for us to evangelize. You could, to other unbelievers, and you could say, "Hey, can you explain all this in any other way? Can you explain the things we're seeing in any other way? This is some pretty solid evidence for the existence of evil, and specifically Satanism." But as for predictions about tribulation or end times, I think every generation has done that. And I really can't imagine it getting much worse, to be honest. I can't really imagine it being much worse than this. But like you said, there were some horribly sick and evil things done by the Bolsheviks and certain other peoples throughout history. And so I don't know if we have a way of knowing how bad it is today.
Yeah.
If we did, predictions are a little bit dangerous, but
Yeah.
they're fun. I won't say they're not interesting. I can't say I'm not curious about it myself.
For sure. But yeah, we don't want to be the people who say, "See here, see there," like Jesus warned about in Luke. But I mean, what is Satanism, though? Is it an anti-religion rather than a religion? Or is it a religion of the self? What is it? Can anyone here answer that?
I would say that it's really an inversion of Christianity. So in that sense, it could be called an anti-religion. And it essentially, I think, says that the morals that Christianity puts forth are oppressive, and that if you want to be a truly good person, if you want to actually achieve new heights, you have to break free of these morals that enslave you. Um, and a lot of what they do is um, it's deliberately designed as a mockery of Christianity. And even in like I know that so many people have this idea that if we just remove God, that somehow mankind by himself will figure out what's right and wrong, which I've always found to be a very intellectually weak position. Like even some of the famous atheists, is I think Christopher Hitchens. Yeah, I could be wrong on this quote, but I remember hearing that in some talk he was giving, he was saying like, let's just agree that people can generally understand what's right and wrong. Like he just kind of throws that out there as if it's taken for granted. But I think that we've seen that without any sort of morality, that people don't just figure out what's right and wrong. People are gonna be self-centered. They're gonna be thinking about themselves first, and the social consequences take a back seat, and you can't have a healthy, functional society that way. And I mentioned this in a previous podcast, but Jesus, there's a famous verse in John where he says, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except through me." Well, it's interesting that he says truth because it seems that truth is often disregarded, and in fact, um, it's deliberately ignored or denied. I mean, I recently watched the documentary about the transgender lobby called "What Is a Woman," produced by the Daily Wire and featuring Matt Walsh. And what's very striking about that is that he's talking to these people who promote this transgender or gender fluidity or whatever have you ideology, and he asks them direct questions like, "What is a woman?" And they can't answer the question. Like they'll just say, "Well, a woman is anybody who identifies as a woman." And he says, "Yeah, but that's just a circular definition. It doesn't tell you what a woman actually is." And some of them might actually get angry and flustered, and they say like, "We're ending this conversation now." And it's just amazing because you realize these people don't actually care about the truth. And in fact, on other times he was talking to people on the street, and he would say, like, "What if I say that I'm a woman?" And they say, "Well, if you think you're a woman, then I guess you're a woman." And and they would talk about like, "Well, that's your truth, then that's true." But I think that's completely satanic if you want to go the full way with it, because I mean, it's we don't all get to just choose our own reality. We have to live in the world that God created, and if Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, if he's the logos, if you want to get into that, um, to view the truth, we simply have to say that any truth that exists in this world is God's truth. It comes from God. He created it. So when you deny the reality that God created, you're denying God himself. So really, I think all this transgender ideology and all its other associated perversions of reality, I mean, all of it's satanic at its core.
Right. Pretty much anything that revolts, rebels against God.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
that's ultimately what it is. Sorry, go ahead.
no, no, I apologize. I interrupted you.
No, no.
But no, I'm in full agreement with what you're saying. In even simpler terms, it's just that God is truth. Jesus Christ is truth, and all truth stems from God. Because if God exists or does not exist, it changes the answer to every single question. Why are human beings here? Where do we come from? What is our purpose? All of these fundamental questions are changed when you reject God. So a perfect example is Stephen Hawking. Everyone knows Stephen Hawking. He's held up as just this ultimate, brainiac guy who just knows all these things. And if he said it, it must be true type stuff. He's like the chief apostle of humanism. And even someone like Stephen Hawking, who can tell you all the theoretical physics as to how they think the universe works, even though they can't test it and prove it, you ask him a very simple question, like whether God exists or not. He'll tell you, no, God doesn't exist. We're just hairless monkeys, and you can immediately realize, how can someone be so smart and such a fool at the same time? And that's the key there, is that when you reject God, you can believe whatever you want, but it doesn't make you correct. It doesn't make it true. And so humans have developed this habit, this practice of just rejecting God and then coming to these conclusions without God being in the picture and claiming that it's knowledge or that it's truth, when in fact it isn't. And so it really does break down just about, everything fundamentally from the beginning. You can't have a roof without a base. And by rejecting God, you remove your base. And this is how we're able to go in all these different directions. This is how people are able to walk the street and say, yeah, a man can turn into a woman and a woman can turn into a man just by saying so. And they all know it's not true, but they don't care, because the alternative is accepting that there is God, and they can't do that because it defies the new satanic religion. It's just this complete and utter rejection, just like when the snake told Adam and Eve. They're like, no, God's lying to you. If you'll eat the fruit, you can be like God. And ever since, we've all still been convinced that if we just reject God and eat the fruit, then we can be gods ourselves. And so it's this complete selfish reason as to why we reject God. It's not because it's good for us. We just hope that it is.
Interesting. That's a very interesting thought. And this actually reminds me of something that it must have been you, John Holt. Um, how on earth could the Israelites have worshipped a Baal or Baal and Moloch, sacrificed their children to Moloch? And I think you kind of answered it, gentlemen. I mean, if you reject God, you can kind of sink into any depravity imaginable. Just fall down the bottomless pit. It always never made sense to me why anyone would want to worship Baal. But is it based on deception at its core? I think, according to what's his name, Jonathan Kahn, the Jewish guy who wrote the Return of the Ancient Gods or something like that. I think it was him who mentioned that worshiping Baal was, you were promised material wealth in return or something. It was also the god of fertility. I can't remember what was promised with worshiping Moloch and Ishtar, or whatever the demon goddess's name was.
Ashtaroth, maybe.
Ashtaroth, yeah.
I'm not an expert on all the
No, yeah, Ashtaroth. Yeah,
evil deities, but
yeah, I think that's the one. Yes.
I want to make a point, though. I think I think the main quality, the main the central quality around Satan is that he's a liar. We always hear that he's the father of lies, and we think of him as the embodiment of evil, or evil incarnate, evil itself, evil defined, and he is. And of course he is a murderer and a destroyer of souls and everything that is evil. But it seems like more than anything else is that he's a liar. He deceives. He tells lies. That might be a more useful way of thinking about Satan, rather than just evil, which is not specific enough in some cases. What we need to keep reminding ourselves is, I think, that he's a liar. He deceives. That's what he does. Before anything else, probably because it's more effective than direct destruction, or it serves his purposes better.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Oh, Sorry, I was just going to say about the ancient Israelites. What kind of struck me about what you were saying is that it seems like this sort of spirit of rebelliousness against God, it often comes in the form of, God's not giving me everything I want, therefore I'm going to go worship some other God. And really, I think that same kind of behavior, I mean, we look at it from a distance and we think, that sounds ridiculous. I mean, you're really that impatient, you're really that selfish that you would reject God just because you're not getting everything you want. But yet, it seems like a lot of people today, even many Christians, are like that. People lose faith in God because they're not getting everything they want, or they think God's just there to make them happy. And if they don't feel happy enough, then they think that maybe God is insufficient. But like it's the same kind of appeal to one's personal desires, appeal to one's personal pleasures that often causes people to rebel.
Well, yeah, and in any conversation about Satanism, we really have to consider why does Satan hate us so much? And why does he spend so much time and effort, on human beings that he sees as below himself? You know, the whole reason Satan turns against God is that Satan was God's favorite. He was his chief angel. He was the most beautiful and most powerful angel. He was number one. And then God creates man and says that man is his greatest creation. And so it was this, feeling of inadequacy, this anger that he had been replaced by us because we have no, power. We have no ability to float among the heavens or to do any of the things that Satan can do. We were created for a greater purpose, not because we're greater individually than he is, but because we have a greater purpose. We're going to be God's children, whereas all the angels, and Satan included, was created to be a servant, and he was unhappy with his lot. And so by destroying and deceiving us and causing us to act like animals, causing us to do disgusting sexual things, or to think that it's okay to lie and to cheat and to steal and to murder and to do all of these other things, it breaks down God's creation. It's a lashing out, a retaliation, for what Satan feels like a slight against him that was given to him by God. And so he attacks God's children to harm him, to hurt him some way. And so a lot of people, they convince themselves that, like, oh, well, whether these crazy Christians say it's satanic or not, you know, I'm doing it because it benefits me. And they think it benefits them in the short run because they're, so foolish not to realize that the person who's giving them these ideas, the person who motivates this behavior is doing it to harm you. Like he's doing it to humiliate you, to turn you into an animal, and the majority of people on this planet believe that they're just, evolved animals. Like he has convinced us that that's exactly what we are, and people think that it's liberating or that it's, smart or somehow makes you more enlightened, to think of yourself that way. And it really is the ultimate deception. I mean, it's such a spider web of lies, and the people that are being lied to have come to believe it so fervently that they actually defend the lie. It's such a complicated thing to untangle.
Yeah, I think it's very important what you said there about how we're being reduced to animals. I mean, really what separates us from the animals is that we can aspire to higher ideals of morality, whereas animals don't really do that. I mean, I remember even recently hearing somebody say, if you don't believe in God, why shouldn't you just, be a degenerate? Why shouldn't you start an OnlyFans? Because if all you are is a piece of meat, then that has no higher purpose or no higher meaning, then why shouldn't you just do something that benefits you in the here and now rather than aspiring to something better?
Yeah, I second that. And just to add to what Gentle said, I think you're right. It's actually funny. I was listening to Jack Hibbs yesterday and the other day, called "The Signs of the Coming Antichrist." And in that lecture, he talks about that. Yeah, the only motive that Satan has now is to basically drag as many humans down to hell with him. He is sentenced already. He has fallen. That will be his fate, hell. And so, because he hates God so much, and he knows that God loves us, and so to hurt God, he wants to drag us with him down to hell. And so that's his only motive. And I think I think that's spot on. There is a really an evil motive to push all of this stuff. Anything that we call sinful, that is not aligning with God, basically, is what sin is. That is being pushed on us uh, ever more. We see it everywhere. It's just all around us. Every company, like John Malt was talking about, like every company going quote unquote woke, they're not woke. I mean, they're just evil, putting up a mask of tolerance, equity, blah blah blah, any pretext to hide their underlying motives, which is total degeneracy and turning away from God. That's effectually
And
what it is, right?
and notice the centrality of lies. I mean, we're
Yeah.
forced to pretend that men are women and women are men.
Right.
And in every television commercial, the white man is the criminal. I mean, is that what we see in life? No, that's another lie. It's just constant lies all day.
That might be a topic for another podcast where we review how lies are told through films. Well, because we all know that the subconscious mind cannot differentiate between reality and fiction. That's one. Satan uses many tricks, but television has sadly been one of his most effective tricks, I'm afraid to say. Going, you're basically, when you turn on the TV, the Grammys is one thing, but just Hollywood films, this is more filthier, evil stuff than most people can possibly realize, can even grasp. But
Yeah, and I think another thing that we should differentiate is the levels of Satanism. There are multiple levels. A lot of us, we use the word Satanism to describe it all, and I think bringing up how the companies react, how the elites act versus how the regular people act, shows these levels of Satanism. People like us who don't reject the truth, we may not be perfect, but we still try to seek the truth, we still try to live moral lives. And when someone demands that we reject the truth, we refuse to. So we're not on the satanic spectrum really much at all. And then you have people who are, they behave generally well. They don't, lie, cheat, or steal any more than the average person. They're not openly satanic. They're not promoting, lies. But when lies come their way, they don't stand up to them. In order to keep their job, they're like, oh, yeah, LGBTQ month. Great, wonderful. They don't really care, but they go along with the lie just to get along. And they're kind of on that lowest tier of Satanism. They're just not standing up to it. And then there is the actual sinners. There is the LGBTQs. There are the anti-whites. There are these people and those people. The criminals that want to legalize the drugs so that they can sell drugs without penalties. Things like that. They support the lies because there's some benefit to them. Like, oh, well, I engage in this sinful, awful behavior. So if people are going to come out and lie and say that what I do is not only good, but it's better than being straight, it's better than not doing drugs, it's actually better than this, that, and the other thing, those people are kind of like that next level of Satanism. They're doing it for a direct benefit. Like, oh, yeah, I'll lie and say that your sin is good so that you can lie and say my sin is good. It's this reciprocal lie. And then there's the elites. There's people who are actually in control of companies, politicians, people who have power, who don't run around dressed like drag queens, who don't, run around and do a lot of this stuff, but they tell everyone else that you should do it. And these are the true disciples because they have the same mentality that Satan had with God. Like, oh, if I can manipulate and control enough people, I become God. And they, as elite humans, think they can do that. Oh, well, I'll tell all the plebs, like, yeah, you guys should all be homosexuals. You guys should all love children. You guys should all, just take your clothes off in the streets and numb yourselves with drugs and alcohol so that I can be in charge, so that I can make all the rules, so that I can be in power. They're at that highest level of Satanism where they've learned I'm not going to engage in the lies so that I can be, one of the animals. I'm going to engage in the lies to try to be in control and be God. And they're just one step down from Satan himself, simply because he operates on that celestial plane. And our elite humans are stuck on this plane. They quite literally are the humanly Satans.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack. Yeah, while you were talking, I did find it kind of amusing that I can't remember who it was at the beginning of this podcast who said that some people view Christians as crazy for pointing out that something is satanic. I mean, that's just because many Christians they can tell the fruits apart from each other, right? By their fruits thou shalt know them. Like they have more understanding, and so they can see that something is satanic, even in its like first stage. Like you were talking about the different stages. When most people think about satanic, they envision maybe a child sacrifice and like a demonic figure screaming and red you know flames and stuff like that. But no, Satanism like can be very very subtle. And when Christians point out that something is satanic, like destroying the innocence of children, with this gender dysphoria stuff, I mean that is satanic. Just it's not done out of love for the children, it's done out of spite. And yeah, it's just something that we need to communicate to the Vakes, that there are different stages of Satanism. But I have nothing more to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to what you said, I mean, it's interesting how is there a verse in the Bible? I can't remember which one it is, but they say like Satan will often appear as an angel of light, and that's how it often operates. They put this veneer of kindness on it, of niceness, of tolerance, and it makes you feel good about yourself for going along with it. But underneath, it's really a destructive force, and so it's like a Trojan horse, if you will.
Yeah, I believe it's 2 Corinthians 11:14. And no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. King James reads, and no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Yeah, I do wonder sometimes how many people genuinely are good-hearted about these things and are really just being deceived, and how many are really true believers who, you know, this is like really a core part of what they believe about some of these things, these evil things.
Yeah.
Well, it's like what you said about the documentary, What is a Woman? When you actually sit these people down and force them to answer a simple question, they know they're lying. But it's the devil's bargain. They're lying for a purpose. It's
Yeah.
about, the goal. It's about what they want to achieve. They don't care that it's based on lies. And so they get frustrated when you put them in a corner and they know that they sound stupid. They can't dress the lie up anymore. You force them to answer the question in a way that isn't making it sound good, and they get upset.
Yeah.
And those people were college professors. They're like the chief liars. Unfortunately, the average person, I think they really know these things are lies. But because of the incentives, oh, I'm going to lose my job. If I say something, I'm going to get in trouble. People are going to think of me as this and that. We really have to understand what a big motivation that is, especially for women. It's a huge motivation to not be socially, awkward. Your social standing is so important. And that really drives a lot of the people to go along with the lie, even if they know it's a lie.
Yeah, that is true. I can testify. I mean, I used to have very anti-white beliefs, just because I felt so guilty for being white, and that I just I could blame pretty much anything on white people, even though in the back of my head I knew it wasn't the case, but just the guilt was driving me nuts. And that was many, many, many years ago. And so I kind of understand where these people are coming from. It's this when people feel jealousy and envy, they can um, convince themselves of all sorts of nonsense, just in order to shift the blame away from themselves onto something else. And I believe that this is one of the core reasons, just one of many, but one of the core reasons why God um, um, likes when we humble ourselves. Because when you humble yourself, you are admitting that you are inadequate, that you can't achieve everything on your own, that you need God, you know. And when you humble yourself before the Lord, He will lift you up, He will exalt you. And God, He hates pride, He hates arrogance, but He loves humility, He loves the humble. And when I humbled myself, and when I finally did a couple of years ago, my life did become better in the process. Yeah.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah, amen. Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, it's all truth. If you start at the wrong point, is going to lead you down the wrong path.
Yeah.
Whereas if the beginning of truth is God, you're going to come to the correct conclusions. It's all a domino effect.
Yes.
I wanted to touch base on something we mentioned earlier. We moved along from it. I didn't want to circle back around too soon, but how you guys were saying, and it was so funny. It made me smile. I think it was John Molt. John Molt said, every generation, has said, "Oh, this must be the end of days because things are getting worse." And every generation they keep getting worse. And it continues to just sink down, 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 and lower and worse and worse. And unfortunately, it's hard to say, but we do have to be prepared that it is going to get worse. It isn't going to get better. It's even prophesied in Revelation. Like it will get to the point that we are hunted. That we are, just like the first Christians were thrown into the Colosseum, or jailed or crucified, or all of these other things. It will happen again. It will get worse for us. Maybe not in our lifetimes. We don't know the timeline, whether it's going to be 100 years, 200 years, 300 years. We don't know that. But we do know that it will get worse, and that faith will be tested. And it's something we have to mentally prepare for, because we potentially could be alive for it. And even if we aren't, perhaps our children or grandchildren might be alive for it. And they have to be kind of, stoic towards what's coming, and it's something that we definitely have to deal with.
Whew. Yeah, indeed. We did talk about uh was it episode 3? Yeah. Oh yeah, I did that one solo, where I talked about the film and the book Tortured for Christ, Richard uh Saberhoff. Wait. Saber Saberhoff.
Insert difficult to pronounce Slavic name here.
Well, I think no, I wasn't he of German descent
I
living in
think he
Romania?
was. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
right. I think he was a German living in Romania.
yeah.
Yeah, something along those lines.
Anyway, I mean, what he went through it was just, you know, I'm not sure I could go through with that.
Well,
You
and
know,
that's what I mean.
he
None
was
of us will
tortured
know
for,
until it happens.
yeah, he was tortured physically every day for years. And one guy, he experienced witnessing his son being tortured to death. That's, in my opinion, even worse. I mean, the brave young lad, he died with Christ on his lips, But still, I mean, having to see that, see your child be tortured to death. I mean, that is something that we have to mentally prepare for. I mean, honestly, because it's likely going to happen. We've seen the evils of the Bolsheviks. I mean, it's evil beyond your imagination. Most of you folks listening, it's just it's just evil. It's sick. I mean, my stomach churned when I really learned what they did to people.
Well, yeah, and we can't forget too. I mean, yeah, the Bolsheviks, but a lot of stuff happened in the East as well. A lot of people don't talk about this very much, but you guys know the rumor from World War II, where or I think it might have been one, where they were spreading propaganda that the Germans had like crucified a Canadian or something to drive up volunteering in Canada and to create atrocities. It turned out to be false. No one
Right,
knows
right.
where the story originated from,
Mm.
but the Japanese did that. The Japanese took, British, Scottish, and American, soldiers as POWs, and they crucified them in their camps.
Oh
They
wow.
were forcing them to build railroads and dig ditches to make railways, especially on the Chinese coast. And workers would be punished by being crucified in front of all the other prisoners, kind of as an insult to their religion, but also, to strike fear and to get them to work harder. So there was even time in the modern day where Christians were crucified, for their faith. And really a lot of the atrocities that happened in the East of that war have been forgotten. And they're quite significant.
Wow. I did not know that. Jesus. I mean, I knew that the Japanese were pretty awful in the Second World War, but didn't know that they crucified people.
Well, we do hear about the rape of Nanking, but we don't hear about the other stuff.
Mm.
Well, because it doesn't make the white people look bad.
Yeah, we know that.
Right. I mean, yeah, I mean,
Christians aren't
Christians
allowed to be
today, I
victims.
mean, even, non-white Christians are being truly persecuted. Christians are the most persecuted people around the globe. And, we white Christians are not yet being hunted down and, raped and murdered simply for being Christian. But that is all being mentally prepared. And we can talk about that maybe next time or just someday, about how Christians are dehumanized in films and TV shows. There are only three types of Christians in Hollywood films: the really stupid Christian, the mentally insane Christian, and the wicked, evil Christian. These are the only types of Christians in films. I would like to do maybe either a podcast or a short video just reviewing some anti-Christian films, because people, like I said before, the subconscious mind cannot differentiate between reality and fiction. So if you see a film depicting a Christian pastor raping a little girl, your mind will perceive that as if it had actually witnessed it. So you see fiction on the screen, you see actors performing an act. It never happened. In reality, it was all fake, but your mind, your subconscious mind, can't tell a difference. To the subconscious mind, this incident actually took place and you witnessed it. That's how dangerous the subconscious mind is. And by this method, Christians are being dehumanized. And that is, it's laying the groundwork for us being persecuted in our own homelands, and white people becoming a minority all across the West, anti-whiteism being flamed, and not good times ahead for us. That's just how it is. So we need to spread the word. We need to wake people up, strengthen them with faith. That's like building the city wall, so to speak. And then we need to battle anti-whiteism. That's the sword, to use that analogy.
These Christians in the films, they always seem to have a Southern accent too, or at least very often.
That's true. That's
Well,
not
and
a coincidence.
it's not just the subconscious. It's the conscious mind. They've done the studies to show that all children will believe what they see in movies is true until someone tells them that some movies are false. And it's about half of adults who still can't tell the difference between true and false when they watch a film. Half of adults, when they watch a film, they will assume that it happened somewhere, and that's why it's in the film. They won't disregard it as made up. So half of us will, but the other half, they consciously believe that anything that's ever been put in a film is true. So, no, yeah, I mean, the average person, even the average adult on the planet, is not as smart as we would like to think that they should be. And that's also something that we have to combat, as people that are, very fickle, or at least don't possess a high enough IQ to be as analytical as they should be about a lot of the things that they see. And yeah, I mean, really what we have to think of it as is we're going to become the surrogate for what represents God on the planet. We Christians. I mean, that LGBT and all these other people, people even non-whites are being told that, like, oh, it's these these white Christians, that are going to get you. Christian is always included. You know, all the all the R word slurs against white people always include these white Christians. These white Christians. Everyone is being mentally kind of instigated to associate Christianity with harming them. And they will, in turn, because of their hatred towards God, use us as a surrogate for God, and take their frustrations out on us. We just by saying, hey, homosexuality is a bad lifestyle. Not only is it unnatural and that it's damaging to you emotionally and physically, it's an affront to God and you shouldn't do that. Just by saying that, we will be considered as actively and violently hurting them, and it will justify violence against us. And we've already seen that. They've already convinced a large portion of the population that, words are violence, and that attacking someone with physical force is justified when someone says words you don't like. So it really is not going to take much for that to simply focus on Christianity specifically, just as it is used currently to focus on white people specifically.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Well, this is a pretty sad topic, but important nonetheless. Yeah, we can talk about this. Can be a whole new podcast, films and the subconscious mind. But is there anything else you want to add to this topic, gentlemen, before we close it off?
Yeah, I think we've covered all the main points. I think it's a good place to close.
All right. All right, then. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And God bless you all. Take care now. Spread the gospel. Be safe. Love you all. See you next time.
God bless everyone.
God bless.
Yeah, God bless. Stand up to Satanism and stand up to anti-whiteism.
Amen.
Amen.